Today there is a lot of interesting news from the Bakhmut direction. The most intense fighting is taking place on the northern flank of Chasiv Yar. The situation in Bohdanivka is developing rapidly. Previously, I reported that Russian forces struggled to generate any gains in the direction of the village over the last month, making this area rather stationary. However, recently, Russian sources reported that Russian forces conducted a series of powerful assaults in and around the village. Ukrainian sources confirmed that Russians used artillery support supplemented by drones to strike Ukrainian positions and undermine the overall Ukrainian defenses within the village. Ukrainian fighters reported that the Russian commanders resorted to pure infantry assaults, likely in order to preserve the future. Nonetheless, these assaults did not give the expected results. Ukrainians managed to halt Russian attacks and force them to dig in and set up positions in trenches and basements inside the small captured portion of the village. If we look at the topographic map, we can see that Ukrainians controlled the heights around the village, which enabled them to detect and strike Russian forces in the lowlands and hamper their advances by inflicting severe losses from elevated areas at which Russians struggled to return fire. Russian sources claimed that Russian forces achieved a 100-meter advance within the village. The total depth of the Russian advancement over the previous months, therefore, reached just 300 meters in a village that stretched along a road for over 3 kilometers. Such a pace of advancement is clearly too slow, and it would take Russians many more months to take Bohdanivka with this costly approach. However, a little bit to the south of Bohdanivka, the situation is very dynamic. Here, Russians tried to flank Ukrainian positions in Bohdanivka from the south along the railways and stretch Ukrainian troops along the contract line by attacking Bohdanivka from two axes of advance. The goal of this series of attacks was to force Ukrainians to pull back from the village. To achieve this, Russians first conducted heavy aerial bombardment of Ukrainian positions located to the south of Bohdanivka, close to Chasiv Yar. Russian bombardments with FAB glide bombs are extremely destructive, capable of making any targeted Ukrainian positions unsustainable for long-term defensive operations. This bombing eventually set conditions conducive for Russian assaults. The main assault started by sending a group of 4 Russian BMD armored personnel carriers to land their infantry at a tree line near the railway embankment. However, Ukrainian fighters spotted the first vehicle and destroyed it on the road. The second vehicle managed to unload its infantry, but it got abandoned after an artillery shell landed close to it, likely inflicting some damage. The third vehicle triggered a landmine, which immobilized the vehicle, although Russian infantry was still able to unload and proceed to secure positions in the tree line. Finally, the fourth BMD was struck by an FPV drone, although without significant damage, allowing it to unload the infantry and have the luck of being the only one in the column to drive back to a safe zone. Now, with these new positions secured, the Russians established a 1-kilometer-long bridgehead that could enable them to attack Ukrainians in 2 separate axes of advance, toward Chasiv Yar and toward Bohdanivka. Right now, Russian troops are around 500 meters away from the eastern edges of the town, with a small forest separating them from the main Ukrainian positions. This gives an advantage to the Ukrainians, as Russians can't launch mechanized assaults through the area, restricting any possible Russian attacks to pure infantry assaults. Russian soldiers, therefore, have to face fortified Ukrainian positions in the town, which they can't do effectively without proper fire support from tanks and infantry fighting vehicles. That is why Russian forces will have to expand their zone of control to the south of the forest if they want to assault the town. Russian control of this area can, however, be problematic for Ukrainians in Bohdanivka, because Russians can uppercut them from the south of the village with a flank attack from the forest and force them to withdraw. For this reason, Ukrainians urgently need to launch a counterattack to eliminate the Russian bridgehead between the town and the village. The counterattack is a viable option because Russians haven't yet built up a strong presence in this area. Russians still continue heavy aerial bombings of Chasiv Yar, which cover the whole town and make it untenable for anyone on the ground there. This caused an incident where an old Soviet-era atomic bunker, where NATO officers were present as non-combatant military attachés, was struck by an Iskander ballistic missile. Ukrainian fighters confirmed this incident, but stated that the Russian strike couldn't kill anyone because such a bunker would require explosives to be placed on the inside for its destruction. In recent days, Ukrainians also increased their efforts to limit Russian logistics in the Bakhmut direction with extensive drone strikes along Bakhmut-Pokrovska, from which the bulk of Russian supplies to the front are coming. Here, the Ukrainians managed to destroy several Russian supply vehicles and a tank with FPV drones. This is extremely important because such Ukrainian drone strikes disrupt Russian supplies to the point where Russians will have to either reduce the intensity of their offensive efforts or temporarily halt it altogether, both in Chasiv Yar and Ivanivsky. If you're against the invasion of Ukraine and you want to support the work that I am doing, consider making a purchase in the online store UA Supporter. Here you can find a lot of products with Ukrainian symbols to not only show your support for this channel, but also for Ukraine. The link to the online store is in the description. Thank you for watching this report, and I will see you in the next one.